for signing inheritance papers, while my only child told me I was no longer welcome in the home where I'd raised her grandson for 5 years. She looked me in the eye and said the words that still burn. You were never really family, Mom. You just stayed because it was convenient. But hidden in those papers I signed, one thing she'll never take from me. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and comment your city so I can see how far the story travels. The rain was coming down hard that Tuesday afternoon. Not the gentle kind that makes everything smell clean. The angry kind that soaks through your coat in 30 seconds and turns the world grey. I remember because I stood outside that law office for almost 10 minutes before I could make myself go inside. My hands were shaking. Not from the cold, from something else, something I'd felt building for months but kept pushing down, the way you ignore a bad tooth until it finally cracks. Vanessa had called me 2 days earlier. Mom, we need you to come sign the estate papers. Dad's been gone 6 months now. It's time to finalize everything. Her voice had that efficient tone she used at work, the one that made people do things quickly without asking questions. I'd heard her use it on Noah's teachers, on the gardener, on Derek when she wanted something done her way. I never thought she'd use it on me. Of course, sweetheart, I'd said, because that's what I always said. What time? 2 o'clock, Henderson and Associates, downtown. Don't be late. She hung up before I could say I loved her. I should have known then. But you don't want to believe it when it's your own child, do you? You tell yourself they're busy, stressed, going through their own grief. You make excuses because the alternative is too horrible to consider. The law office was one of those places that smells like leather and old money. Everything was dark wood and brass fixtures. The receptionist barely looked at me when I walked in, just pointed down a hallway with fingernails so perfectly manicured, they looked fake. Conference room B, they're waiting. They. That word should have warned me. But I was still operating under the assumption that they meant my family, my daughter, maybe Derek, her husband, maybe even little Noah, though it seemed unlikely they'd bring a 7-year-old to sign legal documents. I was so stupid. The conference room had windows that looked out over the city, rain streaming down the glass like tears. Vanessa sat at the head of a long table, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than I spent on clothes in a year. Her hair was pulled back so tight it made her face look severe, sharp. When did she start looking at me like that? Derek sat beside her, scrolling through his phone. He glanced up when I entered, gave me a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes, then went back to his screen. He'd always been handsome in that generic way successful men often are. Good jaw, expensive haircut, eyes that never quite focused on you when you were talking. Mom, sit. Vanessa gestured to a chair across from her, not beside her, across, like a business meeting. My stomach dropped, but I told her to shut up. I sat, smoothed my skirt, the same navy skirt I'd worn to Richard's funeral. My husband, her father, the man who'd loved us both more than anything in this world. 6 months he'd been gone. Sometimes it felt like 6 years, sometimes 6 minutes. Where's Noah? I asked, trying to sound normal, trying to be the grandmother, the mother, the woman who still belonged here. With the nanny, Vanessa said, not looking up from the papers she was organizing. This won't take long. The lawyer walked in then, Mr. Henderson, I assumed. He was exactly what you'd picture, mid-50s, grey at the temples, expression carefully neutral in that way lawyers learn to make everything seem routine. Mrs. Harper, he said, extending his hand. His grip was professional but not warm. Thank you for coming. We'll make this as quick as possible. He started talking about the estate, Richard's estate, my husband's life reduced to assets and distributions and tax implications. I tried to follow along, but the words kept sliding past me like water. The house went to Vanessa. That made sense. We'd been living with her and Derek for the past 5 years anyway, after Richard's first heart attack. Our own home had been sold to pay for his medical care and the endless rehabilitation that insurance wouldn't cover. The retirement accounts, split between Vanessa and some charities Richard had supported. The life insurance mostly to Vanessa, with a small portion designated for Noah's college fund. Everything laid out so neatly, so final. And this section here, Mr. Henderson said, sliding a document toward me, acknowledges the transfer of Mr. Harper's personal effects and remaining assets to his designated beneficiaries. If you'll sign here and initial here and date at the bottom. I picked up the pen. It was heavy, one of those expensive ones that probably cost $100 and wrote no better than a Bic. That's when Vanessa spoke. Mom, we need to talk about your living situation. The pen froze halfway to the paper. I looked up at her, really looked. Her face was smooth, controlled, carefully arranged into an expression of professional concern that made my blood run cold. My what? Your living situation, she repeated like I was slow, like I hadn't heard the words, only the meaning. Derek and I have been discussing it, and we think it's time you found your own place. The room tilted slightly. I gripped the edge of the table. I don't understand. Derek finally put down his phone. He had the grace to look uncomfortable, at least. It's just that with Dad gone and Noah getting older, we need to think about the family's needs, our needs, as a nuclear family. Nuclear family, like I was radioactive, something to be contained. But I I live with you, I said, and hated how small my voice sounded, how confused. I help with Noah. I cook dinner 4 nights a week. I do the grocery shopping, the laundry. I pick him up from school when you're working late. And we appreciate that, Vanessa cut in. We really do. But Mom, let's be honest. That arrangement made sense when Dad was alive and you were both struggling. We were helping you, supporting you. But now, she trailed off, letting the implication hang there like smoke. Now you're just a burden. Vanessa, my voice cracked. Are you saying you want me to leave? I'm saying, she continued, and her tone was so reasonable, so calm, like she was explaining basic math to a child, that it's time for everyone to move into their own spaces. You're still young, healthy. You could get a nice apartment, maybe find some part-time work, join some social groups for people your age. People my age, I repeated. I'm 66, Vanessa. I'm your mother. And I love you, she said, but there was no love in her eyes. But this isn't working anymore. Derek and I need our privacy. Noah needs consistency. And honestly, Mom, you've been so depressed since Dad died. Maybe some independence would be good for you, help you move forward. Each word was a slap, calculated, precise. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. Perhaps we should focus on the documents at hand. No, I said, surprising myself. No, I want to understand this. Vanessa, you're asking me to leave the home where I've lived for 5 years, where I've raised your son while you built your career, where you've lived rent-free, Derek interrupted, and there it was, the real issue. Look, Evelyn, we've supported you financially for years. Your husband's medical bills wiped out your savings. We took you in. We gave you a place to stay, food to eat. We've covered everything. I've earned my keep, I said, and my voice was shaking now. I've taken care of your home, your child. I've given up everything. You had nothing to give up, Vanessa said, and her words were ice. Mom, let's not pretend this was some noble sacrifice. You had nowhere else to go. We took you in because you were desperate. The room went silent, except for the rain against the windows. That's not true, I whispered. Richard and I sold our house to pay for his care. We had a plan. You were going to what? Vanessa leaned forward. Move into a nursing home, live on Social Security. Mom, you were broken. We saved you from that, and now I'm trying to give you a chance to build something of your own instead of living in our shadow. She said it like she was doing me a favor, like this was generosity, not abandonment. I looked at Derek. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I looked at Mr. Henderson. He shuffled papers uncomfortably. I looked back at my daughter, this woman I'd carried, nursed, raised, loved with every piece of my heart for 38 years, and I didn't recognize her. When? I managed to ask. We were thinking end of the month, Derek said. That gives you a few weeks to find a place. We can help with first month's rent, of course. Security deposit. Consider it a parting gift. Parting gift. Like I was an employee being let go. Severance for services rendered. And Noah? I asked because I needed to know. Needed to hear her say it. Vanessa's expression didn't change. Noah has us, his parents. He doesn't need a grandmother hovering around confusing him about family structure. I'm not confusing him. I'm loving him. You're smothering him, she corrected. All those bedtime stories, the special breakfast, the constant attention, you're making him soft. Derek and I are trying to raise a strong, independent child. Your involvement isn't helping. Something inside me cracked. Not broke, not yet, but cracked. Like ice on a pond when the temperature drops just enough. I see, I said quietly. So you'll sign the papers? Mr. Henderson asked, trying to move this along. This efficient dissolution of my life. I looked down at the document in front of me. Pages and pages of legal language I didn't fully understand. Somewhere in there, buried in subsections and clauses, was my husband's last will and testament, his final decisions, his goodbye. And Vanessa wanted me to sign it all away without even reading it carefully. I need a moment, I said. Mom, there's nothing complicated here. I said I need a moment. My voice came out harder than I intended. Vanessa blinked, surprised. Derek's eyebrows went up. Good. Let them be surprised. Let them see that I wasn't completely broken yet. I started reading. Really reading, not just skimming past the legal jargon, but forcing myself to understand each section. It was slow going. The lawyer words tangled together, deliberately obscure, but then I saw it. Page 17, subsection D. The beachfront property located at 1847 Lighthouse Road, previously held in trust, hereby transfers full ownership to Evelyn Marie Harper, as per the deceased's explicit final instructions, dated March 12th. I read it again. Then again, Lighthouse Road. I knew that address. Richard and I had driven past it once, years ago, on a weekend trip to the coast. He'd pointed out a small house perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean, paint peeling, garden overgrown, but the view. This place will be worth millions someday, he'd said. Right now, it's nothing, but someday, I'd laughed. We can barely afford our mortgage, honey. Dreaming about beach houses isn't going to help. But he'd looked at it so wistfully, the way people look at things they'll never have but can't help wanting. When had he bought it? Why hadn't he told me? Mrs. Harper, Mr. Henderson was watching me. Is there a problem? I looked up at Vanessa. She was checking her phone, bored with this whole proceeding, eager to finish and get back to her important life. Derek was looking out the window at the rain. Neither of them had read these papers. They'd just assumed everything was going their way. Why wouldn't they? Everything always had. No problem, I said slowly. Just want to be sure I understand everything. I kept reading. Page 18 explained that the property had been purchased 12 years ago, when Richard's mother died and left him a small inheritance. He'd bought it cash, kept it separate from our marital assets, maintained it through a property management company, and never told me why. Page 19 had the answer, sort of. A letter from Richard to Mr. Henderson, dated just 6 months before Richard's death, before the final heart attack, when he knew probably that he didn't have much time left. Concerned about Vanessa's increasingly controlling behavior toward Evelyn. If something happens to me, I fear my wife will have nowhere to go. This property is her security, her escape. Make sure she understands she owes nothing to anyone. She's earned her freedom. My eyes burned. Richard had known. He'd seen what I'd been too close to see, too desperate to admit. He'd watched our daughter transform into someone who valued money and status over love, over family. And he'd protected me the only way he could. Mom? Vanessa was looking at me now, impatient. Can you sign? Some of us have actual jobs to get back to. The crack inside me widened. Some of us have actual jobs. Like raising her child wasn't work, like keeping her house wasn't work, like the 5 years I'd spent making her life easier so she could have her career and her perfect family meant nothing. Of course, I said. I signed the papers, every page. My hand was steady. Mr. Henderson collected them, looking relieved. Wonderful. That concludes our business. Mrs. Harper, you'll receive copies of everything in the mail within a week. Thank you. I stood. Vanessa stood. Derek stood. We all stood there awkwardly, this family that wasn't really a family anymore, if it ever had been. So, Vanessa said, slinging her designer purse over her shoulder, end of the month. We'll help you pack, of course. I can give you some realtor numbers, places that cater to seniors. That won't be necessary. Mom, you can't afford anything in a decent neighborhood on your own. I said it won't be necessary. Something in my voice made her stop. Made both of them stop. I have somewhere to go, I continued. You don't need to worry about me anymore. Where? Derek asked, confused. That's not your concern. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. Mom, if you think you're going to guilt trip us into... I'm not guilt tripping anyone, I said, and I was surprised by how calm I sounded. How clear. You've made your feelings very clear, your priorities. I understand completely. Good, Vanessa said, but she looked uncertain now, like she'd expected tears, begging, the usual maternal capitulation. Then we're on the same page. Absolutely. I picked up my purse, walked toward the door. Mom, Vanessa called after me. Aren't you going to say anything else? I turned back, looked at her, the stranger wearing my daughter's face. What would you like me to say? I don't know. Goodbye. Thank you for understanding. Goodbye, Vanessa. I left. The rain had gotten worse. I didn't have an umbrella. Didn't matter. I walked to my car, a 15-year-old Honda Civic that barely ran, and sat in the driver's seat while water pounded the roof like fists. Then I cried. Not delicate tears, not quiet, dignified sadness. I cried the way you cry when something inside you dies. Loud, ugly, gasping sobs that hurt my chest and made my nose run, and left me exhausted. How long had it been building? This casual cruelty, this slow erasure. I thought about the morning after Richard died. How Vanessa had stood at his hospital bedside, dry-eyed, checking her phone while I held my husband's cooling hand. How she'd said, we need to make arrangements quickly. I have a presentation on Monday. I thought about the time Noah fell off his bike and scraped his knee bloody, and I'd rushed to comfort him, and Vanessa had snapped. Stop babying him, Mom. He needs to learn to toughen up. I thought about last Christmas, when I'd spent 3 days cooking everyone's favorite meals, and Vanessa had barely touched the food because she was on some new diet. Derek had said, Evelyn, you really didn't need to go through all this trouble. Like my love was trouble. I thought about all the tiny cuts, the small dismissals, the ways I'd been slowly trained to shrink, to need less, to expect less, to be less. When had I become so invisible? My phone buzzed. A text from Vanessa. Don't forget to pack Dad's things. We're donating them to Goodwill next week. Not asking, telling. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I opened my browser and typed in the address. 1847 Lighthouse Road. The property management company had a website, photos. The house was small, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, kitchen that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1970s. But the view, oh God, the view, ocean stretching to the horizon, cliffs, sky, freedom, it was mine. Not theirs, not contingent on their approval or charity, mine. I started the car and drove. Not back to Vanessa's house. I couldn't face that place right now. Couldn't walk into that beautiful prison where I'd spent 5 years convincing myself I was needed. I drove to a motel. The cheap kind off the highway with stained carpets and a vending machine that probably didn't work. paid for 3 nights with a credit card Richard had insisted I keep in my own name. Always have your own money, he'd told me once years ago. Your own accounts. Never depend on anyone completely, even me. I thought he was being paranoid. Now I understood he was being wise. The motel room smelled like cigarettes and industrial cleaner. The bed sagged in the middle. The TV got 5 channels, all fuzzy. It was perfect. I lay down on that terrible bed and stared at the water-stained ceiling and thought about my life. Really thought about it. No distractions, no responsibilities. No one needing me to be anything but myself. When had I last done that? The room was quiet except for the highway traffic outside. No Noah calling for bedtime stories. No Vanessa asking me to run errands. No Derek giving me that pitying look that said, poor Evelyn, nothing left but memories, just silence. And in that silence, something shifted. The crack inside me stopped spreading. Settled, hardened. I wasn't broken. I was breaking free. My phone rang. Vanessa. I stared at her name on the screen until it went to voicemail. She called again, finally sent a text. Where are you? We need to talk about logistics. Call me. I didn't. Instead, I called the property management company. A bored-sounding woman answered on the 3rd ring. Hi, I said. My name is Evelyn Harper. I own the property at 1847 Lighthouse Road. I'd like to move in as soon as possible. There was a pause. Computer keys clicking. Oh, the woman's voice perked up. Mrs. Harper, we've been managing this property for years, but we've never actually spoken to the owner. Mr. Henderson handles everything. Let me pull up the file. More clicking. Okay, so the house is currently vacant, has been for about 6 months. Last tenant moved out shortly after. Oh, I'm sorry for your loss. Your husband's death is noted here in the file. Thank you, I said automatically. The property is yours free and clear, she continued. No mortgage, taxes paid through the end of the year. Would you like us to prepare it for occupancy? It'll need cleaning, utilities turned on, that sort of thing. How long will that take? 3 days, maybe 4? Make it 3, I said. I'll be there Monday morning. Wonderful. I'll email you the details and keys will be waiting at our office. Oh, and Mrs. Harper, I don't know if you've seen the place recently, but the location is incredible. Property values in that area have gone through the roof. You're sitting on quite an asset. I know, I said, and this time I smiled. This time, I spent the next 3 days in that motel room planning. Not elaborate revenge schemes, nothing like that, just practical steps, one after another. First, I called a locksmith and had him meet me at Vanessa's house while she was at work. Derek was there, but he didn't question it when I said I needed to collect some of Richard's things. He just nodded and went back to his home office. I packed everything that mattered. Richard's journals. He'd kept them for decades. Leather-bound books filled with his neat handwriting. His watch, his wedding ring, photos, the quilt his grandmother made, the compass his father carried in World War II. Nothing valuable to anyone but me. I also packed my own things. Not much. Clothes that actually fit. The few pieces of jewelry Richard had given me. My books. My mother's china tea set that I'd kept carefully wrapped in a hall closet because Vanessa said it didn't match her aesthetic. It took 2 trips to load everything into my car. Derek appeared in the garage on the 2nd trip. Moving out early, just to temporary housing, I said. Not a lie. The beach house would be temporary too, in a sense. Everything was temporary, while I look for a permanent place. He nodded, relieved, probably glad I wasn't making a scene. That's good, smart. Hey, listen, Evelyn, I'm sorry about how that meeting went. Vanessa can be direct, but we do appreciate everything you've done for us, for Noah. Where is Noah? I asked. School, then he's got soccer practice, then tutoring. You know how it is. Right. I did know. Knew that 7-year-old Noah's schedule was managed down to the minute. Knew that Vanessa had him in advanced everything. Math, reading, language classes. Knew that he barely had time to be a kid. Knew that I'd been the only softness in his rigidly controlled life. Can you tell him something for me? I asked Derek. Sure. Tell him his grandmother loves him very much, and I'll always be here if he needs me. Derek shifted uncomfortably. Evelyn, we talked about this. It's better for everyone if we make a clean break. Help Noah adjust to the new family dynamic without confusion. Just tell him, I interrupted. Please. Okay, he said, but I knew he wouldn't. Or he'd phrase it in some way that made it sound like I was abandoning Noah instead of being discarded. Didn't matter. Noah would know the truth eventually. Kids always do. I drove away from that house, that beautiful, soulless house with its perfect landscaping and designer furniture, and I didn't look back. The coast was 2 hours north. The property management office was in a small town that smelled like salt and pine. The woman I'd spoken to on the phone, Margie, her name tag said, handed me the keys with a genuine smile. You're going to love it, she said. It's been empty too long. Houses need people. They get lonely otherwise. I thought that was a strange thing to say, but I thanked her. The drive to Lighthouse Road took another 15 minutes, winding up through hills covered in wild grass and stunted trees bent by constant wind. The road ended at my property, a small house with grey shingles and white trim, sitting on 3 acres of cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean. I sat in the car for a long time, just looking at it. Richard had bought this 12 years ago, hidden it away, protected me. Thank you, I whispered, though he couldn't hear me. Thank you for seeing what I couldn't. The house was small but solid. The floors creaked. The kitchen was ancient. The bathroom had pink tile from the 1960s. But the windows looked out over the ocean, and the view made me cry all over again. Not sad tears this time, something else. Something like hope. I unpacked slowly, put Richard's journals on a shelf, his watch on my nightstand, hung photos on walls that needed paint, made myself dinner, canned soup, crackers, nothing special, and ate it sitting on the back porch, watching the sun set over the water. My phone buzzed constantly. Vanessa, Derek. Unknown numbers that might have been them calling from work. I turned it off. That night, I slept better than I had in years. The ocean sounds rolled through the open window, constant and ancient and indifferent to human drama. I was 66 years old, and for the first time since Richard died, I wasn't afraid of tomorrow. Monday morning, I woke to seagulls screaming and went for a walk down to the beach. The stairs were steep, and my knees complained, but I made it. Stood on the sand with waves washing over my feet, cold enough to make me gasp. I was alive. I had survived. And somewhere in the city, 2 hours south, my daughter was probably just realizing I'd taken more from that lawyer's office than she'd given me permission to take. I didn't hear from Vanessa for 3 weeks. 3 entire weeks of silence. No calls, no texts, nothing. And honestly, it was the most peaceful I'd felt in 5 years. I spent those weeks learning how to live alone again. Really alone. Not just physically by myself. I'd been that plenty of times when Vanessa and Derek were at work and Noah was at school. But alone in the way that matters, without waiting for someone to need me, without measuring my worth by how useful I could be. It was harder than I expected. The first morning I woke up at 6 out of habit, ready to make Noah's breakfast and pack his lunch. Then I remembered, he wasn't here, would never be here. I stood in the kitchen for 10 minutes, staring at the old refrigerator, before I realized I was crying again. You don't just stop being a mother, a grandmother, even when they don't want you anymore. But slowly, day by day, I started building something new. I cleaned the house top to bottom, found a local handyman to fix the leaking faucet and the loose boards on the porch, planted herbs in the overgrown garden because I'd always wanted an herb garden, and Vanessa said they attracted bugs. I read Richard's journals, all of them, front to back, years and years of his thoughts, his worries, his love for me written in ink that had faded but never disappeared. The entries from the last 2 years were the hardest to read. Vanessa barely looked at Evelyn today during lunch, just kept checking her phone while her mother tried to tell her about the book she's reading. When did our daughter become so cold? Derek made a comment about us being a financial burden. Said it like a joke, but Evelyn's face fell. She pretended not to hear. I'm worried about what will happen when I'm gone. Who will protect her from them? Bought the lighthouse property today. Haven't told Evelyn. She'd insist we can't afford it, but my mother's inheritance covered it completely. It's not much now, but the location is perfect. 20 years from now, maybe 30, it'll be worth something. More importantly, it's somewhere Evelyn can go if she needs to escape. Insurance against the worst case scenario. Worst case scenario is looking more likely. Vanessa told Evelyn today that she's too involved with Noah, that she needs to respect boundaries. Boundaries with her own grandson, the boy who cries for his grandmother when he has nightmares. I wanted to say something, but Evelyn stopped me. Always making excuses for her, always hoping Vanessa will remember how to love. I sat on the porch and read those words until the sun set and the pages became too dark to see. Then I read them again, by lamplight. Richard had known. He'd seen everything I'd been too afraid to acknowledge. And he tried to tell me in his gentle way, but I hadn't wanted to hear it. Because admitting your child doesn't love you the way you love them, that's a special kind of death. The journal entry from March 12th, the date on the property transfer document, was just 2 lines. Made it official today. The house is hers alone. Henderson has instructions. If I die, Evelyn gets the lighthouse property free and clear. No one can take it from her. Not even our daughter. Especially not our daughter. I pressed my hand against those words like I could reach through time and touch him. You knew, I whispered. You knew she'd throw me away. The ocean crashed against the cliffs below, indifferent and eternal. On day 16 of my new life, I was in town getting groceries when I ran into Margie from the property management office. She was coming out of the post office with an armful of packages. Mrs. Harper? She smiled like we were old friends. How are you settling in? Good, I said, and meant it. The house is wonderful. I'm so glad. You know, I was thinking there's a community centre in town that does activities for residents. Art classes, book clubs, that sort of thing. Might be a nice way to meet people. I must have made a face because she laughed. Not interested in watercolor painting? It's not that, I said. I'm not sure I'm ready for organized socializing. Fair enough. But if you change your mind, they do a coffee hour Friday mornings, very casual, no commitment required. I thanked her and left, but her words stuck with me. When was the last time I'd done something just for myself? Not for Richard, not for Vanessa, not for Noah. Just because I wanted to. I couldn't remember. That night, I made myself a real dinner. Not canned soup or frozen meals, but actual cooking. Roasted chicken with herbs from my garden. Mashed potatoes, green beans. The kind of meal I used to make for Richard on Sundays. I set the table properly. Used the good dishes. My mother's china that Vanessa had called outdated. Poured myself a glass of wine. And I ate alone, watching the sunset through the window. And it was okay. Better than okay. It was mine. I was on day 21 when my phone rang at 7 in the morning. I'd turned it back on a week earlier, figuring Vanessa had forgotten about me by now, moved on to her perfect life without the burden of her mother weighing her down. I should have known better. The caller ID said Derek, not Vanessa. That was the first warning sign. Hello? Evelyn? His voice was tight, controlled. We need to talk. About what? You know what? I sat up in bed, suddenly very awake. I really don't. The property, Salam, he said, and there it was. The beachfront property on Lighthouse Road. My stomach dropped, but I kept my voice steady. What about it? Vanessa's lawyer called yesterday. Apparently there was an asset in Richard's estate that wasn't properly disclosed. A very valuable asset. One that should have been part of the general distribution. Should have been? Don't play dumb, Evelyn. You knew about that house. You signed papers transferring it into your name exclusively. Papers that gave you sole ownership of property worth... He stopped, like the number physically hurt him. Worth at least $3 million. $3 million. I'd known the property was valuable. Margie had mentioned the area was booming. But $3 million? Richard left it to me, I said quietly. It was his to leave. It was a marital asset. No. My voice came out harder than I expected. It wasn't. Check the documentation. Richard purchased it with inheritance money from his mother before we got married. He maintained it separately throughout our marriage. Legally, it was never marital property. Silence on the other end. Then, how do you know that? Because I read the papers before I signed them. Something you and Vanessa apparently didn't do. Evelyn, Derek's tone shifted, became placating, the voice he probably used on difficult clients. Let's be reasonable here. That property is worth more than you could ever need, more than you could ever use. It's sitting there empty while you're living in... Where are you living, by the way? That's not your concern. Come on, we're family. We just want to make sure you're taken care of. Like you took care of me when you kicked me out. The words came out before I could stop them. Another pause. That was Vanessa. I didn't... You sat there, I interrupted. You sat there in that conference room and told me I was a financial burden. That Noah needed to be protected from my influence. You looked me in the eye and calculated exactly how much my 5 years of unpaid labor was worth to you. First month's rent and a security deposit. That was the price tag you put on raising your son. That's not fair. Fair? I laughed, and it sounded harsh even to my own ears. You want to talk about fair? Fair would have been treating me like family instead of hired help. Fair would have been including me in decisions about my own living situation instead of presenting it as a done deal. Fair would have been letting me say goodbye to my grandson instead of erasing me from his life like I never existed. You're being dramatic. I'm being honest. Finally. I heard voices in the background, Vanessa saying something sharp. My wife wants to talk to you, Derek said. I'm sure she does. The phone rustled as it changed hands, then Vanessa's voice, cold and precise. Mom, this is ridiculous. You need to sign that property over to the estate so it can be distributed properly. No. Excuse me? I said no, Vanessa, it's my property. Dad made sure of that. He wanted me to have it. Dad was dying and not thinking clearly. He was thinking perfectly clearly, I cut in. Clear enough to see what you'd become. Clear enough to protect me from you. Protect you? Her voice rose. I've been protecting you for 5 years, housing you, feeding you, giving you purpose. You've been using me, I said, and something inside me snapped. Using me to raise your child while you climbed your career ladder. Using me to keep your house and cook your meals and make your life easier. And the second I was no longer useful, you threw me away. Don't you dare pretend that was protection. We gave you everything. You gave me nothing, I was shouting now, years of swallowed words finally breaking free. You gave me a room in your house and expected gratitude. You gave me access to my grandson and held it over my head like a favor. You gave me the scraps of your attention when you had nothing better to do. That's not generosity, Vanessa. That's cruelty with a bow on it. How dare you? How dare I what? Tell the truth. Stand up for myself. Refuse to hand over the one thing your father made sure you couldn't take from me. That property belongs to this family. I am family. My voice cracked. I'm your mother. I carried you. I raised you. I loved you through every stage of your life, even when you made it very clear you couldn't be bothered to love me back. But apparently that doesn't count. Apparently family only matters when there's money involved. Vanessa was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was ice. Fine, keep your precious house. Live there alone with your self-righteousness, but don't expect to be part of this family anymore. Don't expect to see Noah. Don't expect birthday calls or holiday visits or any of the things you think you're entitled to. I never expected those things, I said softly. I just hoped for them. There's a difference. We're done here. Yes, I agreed. We are. I hung up before she could. My hands were shaking. My whole body was shaking. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the phone, waiting for it to ring again. For Vanessa to call back with more threats, more demands. It didn't ring. That was somehow worse. I got dressed and went for a walk down the beach. The morning was grey, threatening rain, and the ocean looked angry. Waves crashed against the rocks with enough force to send spray 20 feet in the air. I walked until my legs ached, until the cold wind made my face numb, until I couldn't feel the shaking anymore. By the time I got back to the house, there were 17 missed calls, all from Vanessa or Derek. 3 voicemails I didn't listen to, a dozen texts that all said variations of the same thing. Call us, we need to talk, don't be unreasonable. I blocked both numbers. Then I called Mr. Henderson, the lawyer. Mrs. Harper, he said, sounding surprised. How can I help you? I need to make sure my property is protected. The Lighthouse House. My daughter is claiming it should have been part of the general estate distribution. Papers shuffled. Let me pull up the file. One moment. I waited, watching the ocean through my kitchen window. A seal was swimming just beyond the breakers, its dark head bobbing in the waves. Right, Mr. Henderson said. The Lighthouse Road property. No, Mrs. Harper, you're completely protected. Your husband purchased that property with non-marital funds and maintained it separately throughout your marriage. He filed a declaration of separate property with the county clerk's office. It was never part of the marital estate, which means it wasn't subject to distribution upon his death. He could leave it to whomever he chose, and he chose you. So Vanessa can't contest it. She could try, but she'd lose. The documentation is ironclad. Your husband was very thorough. He paused. If I may say so, Mrs. Harper, Richard spoke to me several times about his concerns regarding your daughter. He was quite explicit that this property was meant to be your security, your independence. Thank you, I managed. Of course, if your daughter or her lawyer contact you again about this, refer them to me. I'll handle it. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table and cried again. But this time, mixed in with the grief and anger and hurt, there was something else. Relief. Richard had protected me. Even in death, even when he couldn't hold my hand or tell me everything would be okay, he'd protected me. I wasn't homeless, wasn't dependent, wasn't at Vanessa's mercy. I was free. That night, I started reading through the rest of Richard's journals, the older ones from when Vanessa was young. Before the money and the status and the slow transformation into someone I barely recognized, there was one entry from her 10th birthday. Threw Vanessa a party today. Evelyn made the cake from scratch, 3 layers, vanilla with buttercream frosting. Must have taken her hours. Vanessa barely looked at it. Said she wanted a bakery cake like her friend Madison had. Evelyn's face fell, but she covered it quickly, always covering, always pretending it doesn't hurt. Asked Vanessa later why she couldn't just say thank you. She said, why should I thank her for something I didn't ask for? Don't know where she learned that, but it worries me. I remembered that birthday, remembered spending 2 days making that cake perfect, piping flowers on each layer. Remembered Vanessa's dismissive shrug when I brought it out, candles blazing. I told myself she was just at that age, that all 10-year-olds were a little selfish, a little thoughtless, but it hadn't stopped at 10 or 15 or 25. It had just gotten more sophisticated, more socially acceptable, wrapped in therapy language about boundaries and self-care and nuclear families. Another entry from when Vanessa was 16. Vanessa got into Harvard, full scholarship. We're so proud. But when Evelyn hugged her, Vanessa pulled away and said, Mom, you're wrinkling my shirt. Evelyn laughed it off. I didn't. Told Vanessa she needed to show her mother more respect. She rolled her eyes and said I was being dramatic. Maybe I am. Maybe this is just how teenage girls are. But something feels off. Like she measures every interaction, weighing what she gets against what she has to give. And she's decided her mother isn't worth much effort. Page after page of observations. Small moments I'd forgotten or explained away. Richard had seen them all, catalogued them, worried over them, and he'd known exactly what would happen when he was gone. The journal from his last month was hardest to read. His handwriting had gotten shaky, letters trailing off as pain or medication made it hard to focus. Asked Vanessa to spend time with Evelyn after I'm gone, to make sure she's not alone. Vanessa said, Dad, don't be morbid, but it wasn't morbid, it was real. Tried to explain that her mother would need support, love, family. Vanessa said she'd handle it. That phrase keeps echoing, she'll handle it. Like Evelyn is a problem to be managed, not a person to be cherished. Told Henderson to make absolutely sure the Lighthouse property is protected. Made him write it into the documents 3 different ways. If Vanessa challenges it, it'll hold up. It has to. That house is the only thing standing between Evelyn and complete dependence on our daughter's mercy. And I'm not sure Vanessa has any mercy left. Last conversation with Evelyn today. Told her I loved her. That she was the best thing that ever happened to me. That she deserved to be loved, cherished, protected. She cried and said I was talking like I was dying. I didn't have the heart to tell her I've been dying for months, that we're running out of time. Just held her hand and let her believe everything would be okay. It won't be okay, not for a while, but the lighthouse will be there. And maybe someday she'll stand on that cliff and look at the ocean and remember that someone loved her enough to plan for her future, even when he knew he wouldn't be there to share it. I closed the journal and pressed it against my chest, sobbing so hard I couldn't breathe. I remember, I said to the empty room, to Richard's ghost, to the memory of the man who'd known me better than I knew myself. I'm standing on the cliff, I'm looking at the ocean, and I remember you loved me. The house creaked around me, settling into the night. I was alone, but I wasn't abandoned. The next day I went to that coffee hour at the community centre. Walked in feeling stupid and old and out of place. A dozen women were scattered around a bright room that smelled like fresh paint and brewing coffee. Margie spotted me immediately and waved me over. "Mrs. Harper, you came." "Call me Evelyn," I said, "please." She introduced me around. Names I forgot immediately, faces that blurred together. But they were kind. They asked where I was from, what brought me to the coast, normal small talk questions. I gave them the easy answers. Recently widowed, moved into the lighthouse property, still settling in, nobody pushed for more. We talked about nothing important, gardening, the weather, a new restaurant opening downtown, light, meaningless conversation that somehow felt like the most important thing I'd done in months, because it was mine, my choice, my life. When I left an hour later, one of the women, Patricia maybe, or was it Patricia, stopped me at the door. "It gets easier," she said quietly. "Whatever you're running from, it gets easier." I opened my mouth to say I wasn't running from anything, but she smiled and patted my arm. I moved here 3 years ago after my daughter told me I was too negative, that I was bringing down her household energy. She laughed, but it was bitter. Took me a year to realize she was just ashamed of having a mother who wasn't Instagram worthy. Now I have my own place, my own life, and you know what? I'm happier than I've been in decades. "Does she talk to you?" I asked. "Your daughter?" "Occasionally, on her terms, when she needs something." Patricia shrugged. "But I stopped waiting for her to love me the way I loved her. That's the secret. You can't make someone choose you. You can only choose yourself." She walked away before I could respond. I drove home thinking about those words, turning them over like stones, looking for sharp edges. You can't make someone choose you. You can only choose yourself. For 5 years, I'd contorted myself trying to be valuable enough, useful enough, invisible enough to keep my place in Vanessa's life. I'd swallowed every dismissal, every casual cruelty, every reminder that I was there by permission, not by right. And it hadn't mattered. She'd thrown me out anyway, because it was never about what I did or didn't do. It was about what she wanted, what served her, what made her life easier. I was never going to be enough because she decided I wasn't worth the effort. That realization should have broken me. Instead, it set me free. When I got home, there was a car in my driveway, a black Mercedes I recognized immediately, Vanessa's car. My heart started racing, but I made myself park normally, get out calmly, walk to my front door like I belonged here, because I did belong here. Vanessa was sitting on my porch steps. She stood when she saw me, and I was struck by how tired she looked, older. The perfect makeup couldn't quite hide the dark circles under her eyes. "Mom," she said, "Vanessa." We stared at each other across the space that had once held 38 years of history, and now held only wreckage. "Can we talk?" she asked. "About what?" "About all of this, about the house, about us." I unlocked the door and gestured her inside. She walked in slowly, looking around at my small, shabby, perfect home with an expression I couldn't read. "You're really living here," she said. "I am. It's so small. It's enough." She turned to face me, and for a second, just a second, I saw something that might have been regret in her eyes. "Mom, I didn't come here to fight." "Then why did you come?" She sat down at my kitchen table without being invited. Force of habit, probably. Vanessa was used to taking up space wherever she went. "I need you to understand something," she said. "That property is worth $3 million. $3 million. Do you have any idea what that kind of money could do for Noah's future? His education, his opportunities." "Stop." I held up my hand. "Just stop. This isn't about Noah. It's about you wanting something you can't have." "That's not fair." So, "Isn't it?" I sat down across from her. "Tell me, Vanessa, when was the last time you asked about my future, my opportunities, my needs beyond what I could do for you?" She flinched. "That's not... I've always cared about you." "Have you?" The question hung there, simple and devastating. "I took you in," she said finally. "After Dad died, when you had nothing, I gave you a home." "You gave me a room," I corrected, "in exchange for free childcare, housekeeping, cooking, and emotional labor." "That's not charity, Vanessa, that's exploitation." "I can't believe you're saying this. I can't believe it took me this long to say it." Her face hardened. I watched the momentary vulnerability disappear behind the mask she wore so well. "Fine," she said. "You want to play victim? Go ahead. But that property should be mine. I'm his daughter, his only child. I should have gotten everything. He gave you everything, I said quietly. The house, the investments, the life insurance, everything except one small piece of security he set aside for me. And you can't stand it. You can't stand that there's one thing in this world I have that you don't. She stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. You know what? Keep it. Keep your little house and your ocean view and your martyrdom. But don't expect me to feel sorry for you when you're here alone with no family, no purpose, nothing but your resentment. I expect nothing from you, I said. That's the difference between us. I finally stopped expecting. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. Stopped, turned back. Noah asks about you, she said, every day. He doesn't understand why you're gone. The words hit me like a fist in the chest. Then tell him the truth, I managed. Tell him his grandmother didn't leave. She was sent away. I'll tell him you chose this, that you chose a house over him. You'd lie to your own son. I'll tell him what he needs to hear to move on. She opened the door. Goodbye, Mom. I hope your independence is worth it. She left. I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the door for a long time. Then I got up, made myself dinner, and ate it watching the sunset. Because she was wrong. My independence was worth everything. The weeks after that confrontation with Vanessa should have felt like freedom. And they did, in a way. But freedom has a price nobody tells you about. It's lonely as hell. I'd wake up every morning in that beach house, and the first thought wasn't gratitude or relief. It was Noah. Where was he? What was he doing? Did he ask about me at breakfast? Did Vanessa tell him I didn't care anymore? The not knowing was worse than the rejection. I tried to build a routine. Mornings I'd walk the beach, afternoons at the library volunteering, evenings reading Richard's journals over and over like they held some secret answer I'd missed. But everything felt hollow, like I was going through motions, waiting for something to shift. 3 weeks after Vanessa's visit, I was at the grocery store when I saw him. Noah. He was with Derek, standing in the cereal aisle. 7 years old, wearing a jacket that was too big for him, holding a box of some sugary cereal Vanessa would never approve of. Derek was reading something on his phone, not really paying attention. My heart stopped. Actually stopped. I stood there frozen behind a display of canned soup, watching my grandson exist in the world without me. He looked thin, tired. His hair needed cutting, and there were dark circles under his eyes that hadn't been there before. I should have walked away, should have respected the boundary Vanessa had drawn, should have been the bigger person. But I couldn't. Not when he was right there. Not when every cell in my body was screaming to go to him. I stepped around the display, started walking toward them, got maybe 10 feet away when Noah looked up. Our eyes met. For a second, nothing. He just stared at me like he wasn't sure I was real. Like maybe I was something he'd imagined. Then his face crumpled. Grandma? The word came out small and broken, and I was moving before I could think, closing the distance between us, dropping to my knees in the middle of the grocery store. Hi, baby. He slammed into me so hard we both almost fell over. His arms wrapped around my neck and he was crying, not loud, but these awful silent sobs that shook his whole body. You're here, he kept saying. You're here, you're here, you're here. I'm here. I held him tight, breathing in the smell of his shampoo, feeling how much bigger he'd gotten in just a few weeks. I'm right here. I thought you were gone forever. Mom said you moved away and you were busy and you didn't have time for me anymore, and I thought, stop. I pulled back to look at him, wiping tears off his face with my thumbs. That's not true. None of that is true. I've been here the whole time wishing I could see you. Then why didn't you come? Because your mom said I couldn't, Evelyn. Derek's voice cut through the moment like a knife. I looked up at him, still holding Noah, and saw fear written all over his face. Derek, you can't be here. You can't talk to him. He's my grandson. And Vanessa has made it very clear that you're not supposed to have contact. Vanessa doesn't own him. My voice came out louder than I intended. People were staring. I didn't care. She doesn't get to decide who loves him. She's his mother, and I'm his grandmother. I raised him while she was busy with her career. I was there for every nightmare, every scraped knee, every moment she was too important to show up for. And now she's erased me from his life like I never existed. Evelyn, please. Derek glanced around nervously. You're making a scene. I don't care about a scene. I care about him. I looked back at Noah, who was watching this exchange with huge, frightened eyes. Noah, sweetheart, I need you to listen to me. I didn't leave because I wanted to. I left because I had to, but I never stopped thinking about you. Not for 1 second. Mom said you didn't want to see me anymore. The words hit like a physical blow. She lied. Evelyn, Derek tried to interrupt, but I talked over him. Your mom lied because she's angry at me. But that has nothing to do with you. You didn't do anything wrong. I love you exactly as much as I always have. Then why can't you come home? Because it's not my home anymore. Your mom made sure of that. Noah's face twisted. I hate her. I hate her so much. Noah, don't say that. Derek started. I do. She's mean and she yells all the time and nothing I do is good enough. And now she took Grandma away and I hate her. He was shouting now and people were definitely staring. An employee started walking toward us. Derek looked panicked. We need to go, he said, reaching for Noah. No. Noah pulled away from him, wrapped himself around me tighter. I want to stay with Grandma. I want to go to her house. You can't, buddy. Why not? Why can't I just live with Grandma? She actually wants me. Your mom wants you. No, she doesn't. She wants me to be perfect, and I'm not perfect, and I'm tired, and I just want Grandma. He was completely breaking down now, crying so hard he was hiccuping. I held him and rocked him and hated Vanessa with a fury that burned. Sir, ma'am, the store employee had reached us. Young kid, couldn't have been more than 20, looking deeply uncomfortable. Is everything okay here? Fine, Derek said quickly. Family situation. We're leaving. I need to make sure the child is safe. He's safe with me, Derek snapped. I'm his father. The employee looked at me. And you are? His grandmother. Who isn't supposed to be here, Derek added, and I heard the warning in his voice. The threat. The employee's expression shifted. Sir, if there's a custody situation, there isn't. My wife and I are together. This is my mother-in-law. There's just been some family disagreement and we're handling it, but we need to go. He tried to pull Noah away again. Noah screamed, I hate you, and I hate Mom, and I want Grandma. Noah, stop it. Let him go. My voice came out cold and hard. You're scaring him. I'm scaring him? You're the one who ambushed us in a grocery store. I didn't ambush anyone. I was shopping and saw my grandson, and you expect me to just ignore him? Yes, that's exactly what I expect. Derek's face was red now, veins standing out on his forehead. Vanessa was very clear, no contact. And if she finds out about this, what will she do? Take him away from me more than she already has? Make him believe I don't love him? Oh wait, she's already doing that. You're making this worse. I'm not the one who made this situation. I'm not the one who kicked me out and cut me off and poisoned my relationship with my grandson. And I'm not the one who's violating the boundaries we set. Your boundaries are cruel and unnecessary and designed to punish me for daring to stand up for myself. We were both yelling now. Noah was still crying, pressed against me, trembling. The store employee had called for a manager. Other shoppers had their phones out, probably recording this disaster. This was bad. I knew it was bad, but I couldn't make myself let go of Noah. Evelyn, Derek's voice dropped, became almost pleading.